The following thoughts on Hoppe Hour do not represent Cox Media Group or its sponsoring. Anything you hear may and will be used against you. Thank you. Voted as best local podcast in Tampa Bay by the Creative Loafing. You're listening to Hoppe Hour.
What up? What is happening? This is Hoppe Hour. I am your host, Ryan Hoppe, and I am very honored about my next guest. He is the co-creator of the cartoon on Netflix, F is for Family, with Bill Burr. Michael Price is on the phone line. What's up, man?
Hey, Ryan, how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm very honored that you responded back to me on Twitter. I love adult animation. I grew up watching any show that you can name that's an adult cartoon, but there's something about F is for Family that it just immediately touched me. Like, it's amazing. Like, I haven't seen a cartoon this great maybe in years. Like, it's right up there with The Simpsons. Like, a lot of shows now are sort of the same thing, and some of them are too surreal and goofy. You guys have something golden with F is for Family.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you so much. We're just so happy, because we've been working on this thing off and on. We started working on it almost 4 years ago. So for the longest time, it was just a couple of us in a room, and now the people are seeing it, and we're so excited by the response of people like you, and that like the show as much as we like it. So we're thrilled.
Did you guys ever get discouraged because, like, you're going on a year and then 2 years and then 3 years? Was there ever a point when you guys maybe thought this wasn't going to happen?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just to give you a very quick rundown of what happened was, it began from, of course, from Bill Burr, who, is a great stand-up comedian and had for many years thought about trying to work some kind of animation maybe onto his website or something, about some of the stories he tells in his act about his dad and about his family. But then he hooked up with the producers at Wild West Productions, which is Vince Vaughn's production company. And they decided they wanted to try to develop this into an actual animated series. And that's how I got involved because, Bill is a great stand-up, but he didn't have much experience working for television writing or animation. So they went out and looked at various writers who had animation experience. And I was the one that had a meeting with them, and we really hit it off, and they decided to work with me. So we worked on the idea for a long time. We pitched it to another network first, who initially liked the idea enough to have us write a script that we wrote for the first episode, like a pilot. And then we turned it into them, and they said it was very funny, but they just decided they didn't want to go forward with it. So there was a moment there where we all kind of thought, okay, well, that's it. That's how it works sometimes. But I want to give all the credit in the world to our executive producer, the head of Wild West, Vince Vaughn, who is an amazing guy. He's not just a great actor. He's really funny, but he's really passionate, and he really show. And he said, this is not dead. I know we're going to bring this. And he immediately thought of bringing it to Netflix. And he had kind of a prior relationship with some of the people at Netflix. And Bill Burr had a relationship with the people at Netflix because he had done some specials for them. And we took it there, and they got it, and they ordered the show. But there was definitely that moment where we thought, this is not going to happen.
What's it like when you guys find out that it got green-lighted by Netflix? Like, how surreal is that?
Oh, my God. Well, it's just so exciting. And, to be in a room, we had a meeting with the people at Netflix where they had read the script, so they were familiar with the script and liked it. And then we had this meeting where we kind of talked about what we go on, what we do going past that script, what the show would look like, and we heard back from them a couple of days later that they wanted to do it. And I can't even tell you, you had to like peel me off the ceiling. I was so excited. Because this was the first show that I've created, I co-created it with Bill. I've done a lot of pilots and written some pilots that never got past the script phase, didn't get made, so this was the first thing of mine that I've co-created or created in any way that got on the air. So it was just an exciting feeling to know that we were going to really do this thing. And
now, how does the writing process work? Are you guys all in a boardroom and you share ideas, or do people throw a bunch of episodes and then you sort of pick which ones you like the best? How does the writing go?
Well, yeah, I mean, the way we did our show was that, that first script was a collaboration between myself and Bill and a couple other producers where I did the actual writing of the script, but then we all kind of sat down together and punched it up, and Bill threw a ton of jokes in there, and we all kind of rewrote it together. And then once we got ordered to do 5 more episodes or make 6 episodes, then we hired a writing staff, which was pretty smaller, a lot smaller than your normal sitcom writer's room. We only had about 5 of us all together. We hired a couple of veterans guys who were just fantastic writers who had worked on a bunch of shows, a guy named David Richardson, a guy named Tom Giannis. We hired some young writers who were just getting their start, Emily Towers and Joe Heslinga and a guy named Henry Gamble. And we then spent a long time just sort of talking through what the other stories would be, and also working out what would be kind of the serialized nature of the plot, what the story was about Frank and dealing with his work problems and the union and all that stuff. And then everyone went off and wrote a first draft of their story. And when the draft came back in, then we were all together in the room, sitting around a table in this room where, I was sort of in charge of the room, and I would lead the rewrite, and we'd say, okay, well, we need a new thing here. This can be better. And everyone pitched. That's sort of how sitcom writers' rooms work, where you say, okay, we could use a better line here, and everyone pitches, and we put in the one that's the funniest, and then we move on from there. So the scripts were rewritten and punched up in that way.
Are there any arguments or anxiety that ensues when you guys are all in the room, or do you guys sort of know that if you guys work it out, it'll get done?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both, because everyone was very smart. Everyone was very passionate about the show and believed in the show as much as anyone. So there would be arguments, debates, I'd say, about, well, should we do this? Should we go in this direction with the story? Or is this joke better? Or is this the best way to word the joke? And then ultimately, ultimate decision in the room came down to me. But I really, you hire a staff because you value them and you trust their judgment and you listen to them. So, I'd say we had spirited discussions many times about a particular story point or a particular joke that we ultimately resolved. And we knew that we'd get there in the spirit of collaboration, which is the only way you can only do it when you're running a writer's room or in a writer's room. Everyone's reaching towards the same goal, which is to get the script in the best shape as possible and get home. So, it's not just like a dictatorial thing where I say that's what we're doing, but we had a lot of very, very fun and interesting what wasn't and what would work better. Everyone contributed.
Now, what was the longest you guys ever had a meeting? Because sometimes you hear with shows like South Park that they're just up for 24 hours in a row trying to get something done, and other shows like that. So were there days when it would just go by so slowly and it was a long day?
Yeah. Our average day, we'd start work around 10 o'clock or so, and we'd go maybe till around 7. I have a family, so I want to go home. I don't want to work late.
Yeah.
And there were a few nights where we had to work a little bit later because, we had certain deadlines we had to hit. We had the way the scripts work is that we get the script ready, and then we have what's called a table read with the cast, where the cast comes in and we invite guests, people who work on the production, but also friends and family to listen in. And it's kind of like putting on a performance where everyone listens to the script being read for the first time, and we're able to gauge how it plays. Is it funny or not? Is it getting laughs? And then we rewrite it, and then it gets put into, production. We rewrite it, and then the voices get recorded and so on. So when we were in the middle of that, there were certain nights where we had to work a little bit later because we had a deadline to meet. We had the table read the next day, or we had to be in the recording studio and have the script ready. But for the most part, I've worked on some shows where it was different than that, where we were working every night till midnight or some nights till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And I just can't function that way. So we really were focused, and we really just pushed it along, and we never worked super late.
Now, there's some shows where I'm not a big fan of some of the voices, and some of the other voices are great. But when F is for Family, every voice fits the character's face. How hard was it of a process to find the perfect people like Haley Reinhardt for Bill? Like, how hard was it, or did it go pretty smoothly to get all the voices?
Well, it was a combination of smooth and difficult for some of the characters. You know, we knew Bill was going to play Frank, and there were some actors that I knew of that I had worked with before or I admired, who I suggested for the cast. So, for instance, there's a great, hilarious, wonderful actress named Mo Collins, who was on Mad TV and also has been on Parks and Recreation and is super funny and versatile. And so I'd always wanted to work with her, so I recommended her for the cast. And she plays a whole bunch of parts on the show. She plays Jimmy the bully. She plays Brandy, the ditzy wife of the head of the airline. She played so many characters on the show, so funnily. She played the woman who was Sue's boss for the Plasticware company. So I knew we wanted her. There was another guy I'd worked with on some other stuff, this guy named Trevor Duvall, who's a great actor who also was very versatile, played a bunch of characters. He played Mr. Holpenwasser, the little German man who the kids are afraid of, and a bunch of characters. But then when we got to the main characters, like we knew we wanted an actress of real depth to play the wife of Sue. And so we wanted her to be real and really have someone who had some kind of a track record of playing drama, So we were so happy that Laura Dern, responded to the material and read it and told us she wanted to do it. So once we got her, then we were able to get other actors of that kind of, of name quality, but also of high quality acting. Like Sam Rockwell played the neighbor Vic was a huge get for us. And Justin Long, which was so perfect. And he was friendly with Vince Vaughn already and knew Bill Burr a little bit. So, it was just great to find people like that. And then some people were total surprises. We were really having a difficult time finding the voice for Bill, the kid. We'd found Maureen, Debbie Derryberry plays Maureen. She's a great voice actor, like a real pro who's done voice acting for years and years. But we couldn't find anyone that sounded right for Bill. And it was almost like we only had a day or two left before we really had to start getting the show together. And we heard this tape of Haley Reinhart that she had made where she auditioned for the role of, I think, of Charlie Brown, maybe in the Peanuts special. So we heard a tape of her reading a speech from Charlie Brown Christmas or something. And her natural voice, she's a great singer, but she has a naturally kind of raspy, husky voice that just sounds like a 10-year-old boy. So we were like, oh, my God, this is it. This is her. So we brought her in. We knew she didn't have a whole lot of acting credentials, but we brought her in and interviewed her, and she read the piece of the part, and she just nailed it. And we're like, oh, my God, we were like, it was like a gift from God that we got her. And the rest of our cast was just all fell into place with really great actors, Kevin Michael Richardson, Dave Koechner, Gary Cole. We were so lucky to get these people to do our show.
Now, is it weird when you watch some of these guys, maybe they do more than one voice and that more than one voice talks to each other in the show? Is it weird to see the actors talk to each other? Like the one person that's just talking in one voice and then another. Is that weird to watch?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm kind of used to it by now because I've been working on The Simpsons for a long time now, and our Simpsons cast is so versatile and so great. And they've been doing it for 27 years. So I'm just used to seeing Dan Castellaneta have an entire scene where it's Homer talking to Krusty or whatever, or Harry Shearer being Mr. Burns and Smithers doing a scene together, and they just switch back and forth with no effort at all. I mean, that's incredible. So it's still amazing to see for me how talented they are, but it's not as big as a shock as it was, several years ago when I first started working with them.
Now, how much of it is based off of Bill Burr's life, and is there some of it that's mixed in with your life, maybe growing up?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, the way the show began was with Bill's story about his dad and the way his dad was a little volatile and would yell and some of the things that, like, I'll put you through that fucking wall. That's a direct quote from Bill's dad. But then as we continued to develop the show, and especially as we brought other writers on, it became a mixture of everybody's families, So
yeah.
A lot of it is my family. Like, for instance, the story in the very first episode with the magnet on the TV. That's an actual real thing that my older brother did. You know, he broke the TV with the magnet. Some of the stuff in other episodes is based on things that happened to us. Like, there's this thing in the second episode where Maureen, the little girl, they make a slip and slide, and she breaks through the slip and slide and rolls into the road. That's based on something that happened to Emily Towers, our writer. So it was really fun for us to sort of, when we got the group together, before we even started talking about episodes, we just spent a day sort of just going over, like, what are your stories? What kind of stuff did you do when you were growing up? And so much of it wound up on the show, so that it ultimately is a big mixture, a combo of everybody's family who works on the show.
Now, when you guys are like getting to know each other and find out about each other's lives, would you guys go out to eat or maybe get a few drinks so you guys feel comfortable around each other?
Yeah, we do that. I mean, we found ourselves in the room all the time, so we got to know each other very well because the room was very small.
Yeah.
So we're spending all day, and we were in this building in a kind of a not too happening area of Hollywood where there wasn't a whole lot of places to go. So, you know, lunch would be brought in for us. So we'd work for a few hours and then break for lunch, but then we did just go sit in another room, like a lunch room, and have lunch together. So, you know, occasionally we went out afterwards and things like that, but we became a very close team within a very, very short amount of time. And we got to know each other ourselves really well and became really close, which is what you have to have in a writer's room, especially a writer's room that small. You've got to all get along, and we became very, very close with each other.
Now, here's what I want to know, and this is for F is for Family, The Simpsons, or any other cartoon you've worked on. How often do you guys change the look of the characters? Like, do you guys go, oh, wait, but we need to change his eyebrows or his body shape? Like, how often do you guys change the look of the character until you're happy with it?
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, you know, it's interesting because on this show, you know, we did all the other work first, which was come up with the idea for it, create what the characters were, and then write that first script, which we had. That first script was written, you know, maybe almost a year and a half or 2 years before we actually put it into production. So then once we got to put it in production, then it was like, okay, now what is it going to look like? And we were very happy and lucky to have a great animation team with us at this company called Gamont Animation, where we were able to sort of go into them and say, well, here's our general thoughts about what the character should look like. We kind of thought it should look kind of like a weird cross between, let's say, King of the Hill and the kind of like graphic novel illustration that's really popular right now, and mixed with also as if it was made by like Hanna-Barbera in 1973, you know, kind of like that kind of Johnny Quest style of animation. So then they presented us with a whole bunch of different versions. You know, we had to work on the main character, Frank, first. So I can't even tell you, there were dozens and dozens and dozens of versions of him where at first he had really short hair. He had a crew cut, you know, he was tall, he was short. You know, we were able to sort of look at a bunch of stuff until we finally found that look that he has right now, where it was sort of a mixture even of like, well, I like the ear on number 4, but I like the glasses on number 5, and they figured it out. And then from there, once we had Frank, then we were able to do the rest of the family from there. And the next character we really settled on after Frank was Kevin, the older son, because we wanted him to look almost exactly like a little version of Frank. So if you look at the two characters and you take Frank's glasses off and you remove Kevin's long hair, he has almost an identical face to his dad. So we thought that would be funny because he hates his dad, but he's going to end up looking like him when he gets older. And then from there, we just did all the rest of the characters. They brought different versions of them, how they would fit with each other. And then we had to look at the family. Then that helped us establish what the look of everybody else would be. And again, with every character, even the smallest character, they would present us with, you know, 7 to 10 options that we could pick from and pick and choose and mix and match. It was really exciting and really fun to create the look of the show from scratch.
Now, going back to Kevin, I think he is a brilliant character because he's not just in the 70s. We all know someone that's like Kevin. Everybody in life knows a Kevin. So is it based off of everybody that knew someone like that in the boardroom, or was there somebody that was sort of a Kevin back when they were teens?
I certainly wasn't. I was more like a Bill when I was a kid. I was a good boy, you know. I was not rebellious in any way. So I think it was based on, you know, Bill Burr had a real feeling for Kevin right from the beginning. So I think there might have been a little bit of him in there. But then it just became like a feeling of all other kids that we had known growing up, kids like that, you know, angry, surly, rebellious teens. And I'll tell you this, Bill Burr is amazing, but the moment where Kevin just became so crystallized for us was when we were working on that first script, and it was quite a while ago now. And we were working on that scene in that first episode where Frank is you know, giving them the third degree about who broke the television.
Yeah.
And Bill pitched a thing where Kevin confesses that he did it, but then says, "Guess what? I didn't do it," you know, just to fuck with his dad. And then I'll never forget, we're sort of like improvising in a way in the room, and I go like, "Why would you say you did it when you didn't?" And we try to come up with funny lines, you know, funny kind of comedy lines. And Bill just came out and said, "You should say, because I fucking hate you." You know, and that just made us really laugh and made us feel like, I think that's the moment where we really discovered what the show was, in that we didn't have to try to work super hard to make it clever, to make it sound like a comedy writer's joke. But it was funny because it was real and it was shocking and it was honest. And so that's the moment, I think, where the tone of the show really got set. And that's that, and of that character too, that he just comes right out and tells his father that he hates him. Just made so much sense for us and really set us on the road with that guy.
Now, another character that I can relate to is Vic, not because I'm a hippie, but because he works in radio, and there's plenty of people in this business that are like a Vic. How did you come up with him? Because that character is brilliant. His one-liners, dude, kill me. Like when he helped Frank pick up the TV and he touches Frank's shirt and Frank's like, "I'm going to have to go burn that fucking shirt." I watched that 3 times. That is brilliant. How did you come up with Vic?
Well, I'll tell you, I'll tell you that Vic is so very, 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 very loosely based on this guy who was my best friend's dad growing up in my little town in New Jersey. So I lived in a little suburb in New Jersey called South Plainfield, New Jersey. And my dad was a blue-collar guy. He worked for a construction company. And, you know, everyone I knew did that. You know, nobody was in show business. So this guy, my friend Ricky, his name was Vic, and he worked for a record company, a jazz label. And so to me, I mean, he didn't look at all like the character on the show. You know, he was an older guy. He was Italian and everything. But to me, who was starstruck by show business because I was so into TV and movies, a guy who worked in New York City for a record company was like, holy cow, wow, this is everything, you know? So he was based on that guy a little, just in that way of like a guy who Frank could envy in a way, but also like he hates him because he envies him. So it was really fun to come up with that character. And then we kind of went with it that where Frank is a guy, even though it's 1973, his mindset is still 1963. You know, he's not a 70s guy by any way. He's a throwback. He's still clinging to the old ways. And so we thought it would be really funny to have the neighbor be the guy who just embodies the lifestyle of the 70s, the hedonism. And he's, you know, Frank is way down with a wife and 3 kids. Vic has a different girlfriend every night. He has a car. He has a boat. He has a motorcycle. It just became so fun to come up with this guy and that he has nothing tying him down.
Yeah.
So it was so fun and easy to write jokes for him because in that way he's sort of an unrealistic guy, although we treat him like he's real. But he just has the charmed life of anyone you would hope to have. So it was so fun. And then once we got Sam Rockwell doing the voice, it was so easy to write for him because he just spins everything in such a hilarious way.
Now, is Rosie based off of Patrice O'Neal? Because I have a lot of friends that are in comedy, and they say there's a big resemblance to the great Patrice O'Neal and Rosie.
Yeah. I know that Bill was really close to Patrice. I never knew him or met him. I won't say that I'm not a devotee, of stand-up, so he was not someone who I was very familiar with, but I knew that Bill liked him. So I do believe that there's a little bit of the design is meant to resemble him. But I pitched the character not having heard of Patrice.
Yeah.
But once we got the idea that Frank worked at a airport, and that was based on a joke really in that first script that I wrote, because the first script really, the earlier version of it, did not have anything to do with him working at an airport or even mentioning it. And that thing at the end of the first episode where he finds out that he got the new job because his boss died was tacked on. So. Right. Okay. Right. So I invented the character based on once we figured out that Frank worked at an airport.
Yeah.
And it's like this everywhere. It was one particular guy. I think even around the time I pitched the character, I had just taken a flight out of LAX to go somewhere to visit my mom back east, and there was a guy exactly like this working at the SkyCap station for United Airlines. A big, kind of older African American guy who was very jovial and joking and everything like that. And, hey, how you doing today? Where are you going? And, he was, those guys are working for tips, so he's trying to work really hard. He was really nice and really fun. But I wanted to imagine that guy, like, afterwards, like, getting mad about his tips and stuff like that. So I pitched that character based on that, and then it turned into this bigger character that had a whole lot to do with the union and everything like that. But that's where Rosie came from. And we always had that idea of him sort of being, on stage and being like, hey, where are you going today? Oh, Syracuse, New York, And then when he's off stage, like, God damn it, I only got tipped a quarter. So that's where that character came from, for sure. And then I know that the look of him, the design, I'm sure was influenced a lot by Patrice O'Neal.
Now, what I loved about the show, too, is I feel like even though it takes place in the 70s when it comes to everything that went on at the airport, we all know somebody that's been in that situation when not everyone's getting along in the boardroom. So was this based off of someone's dad who was having troubles at the job, or was this just based off of things in life where your job's not always the best?
Well, yeah, it was based more on things on life and that we needed – because we were going to do this Netflix style of storytelling, we needed a through line story that would carry throughout the entire season and build to the last episode. So we were talking about what that could be, and I can't remember exactly who it was that pitched it, but once we hit on it, it made total sense that Frank gets this new job, and he's upgraded to management. He's excited to have a better job now, but now he's sort of stuck between the boss who he wants to please and his old friends who he used to work with now that there's a union problem going on. So it just laid out in a really great way. And then all that just came out of that. All that came out of this desire to create a story that could carry over several episodes and put Frank seemingly getting his dream job, but it turns into a nightmare where he's stuck between his friends and the boss, and how that works out and how that plays out over the last, 3 or 4 episodes.
Now, who came up with Frank's boss? Because the minute I saw him, I began laughing when he's eating chicken in the interview. Even before he was talking, I was dying laughing. Who came up with the boss?
Well, that was me. I've had a lot of jobs in my life, and there was a job I had in college where I worked at this place where the boss was basically that guy. So he's based on this guy I had who was a boss of mine when I worked at this job in college. He wasn't as gigantic and fat as this guy is, so that's a little bit of an exaggeration. But in every other way, he was a pretty grotesque guy. He was kind of a big, fat guy. He would sit behind his desk and puff on a cigarette and eat a sandwich and sort of bark orders at everybody. He was a little dictator. And he wore these like kind of tight short sleeve shirts with like a tie like screwed up to his neck. And and everyone was afraid of him, but nobody really liked the guy. So he's based on that guy. So then we decided, because we're a cartoon show and we can really exaggerate, we just made him the most grotesque, guy of all time, who just, and also we're having fun with the 70s and how the lifestyle was different back then. A guy who just chain smokes and just eats like crazy.
Yeah.
And when you get together a bunch of funny people in a comedy room, you can really go crazy, So we had him doing more insane things that are on the show, eating and everything, that we dialed it back a little bit, but we felt we could really go to town with this guy and make him just the most grotesque, piggish guy of all time.
No.
And luckily we got Dave Koechner to do his voice, who just put it over the moon. I mean, he's so funny and did such a great job with him.
How did you guys come up with Cold Ruger? I'm a young guy. I'm just 22 years old, so I haven't seen many shows from the 70s. I've seen some, but is there a specific show or thing that Cold Ruger is based on? Because that's another funny part of the show.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there were a bunch of shows, a bunch of detective-style shows in the 70s that were mostly all produced by one producer named Quinn Martin. And his shows were like, there was one called Cannon, starring William Conrad. There was one called Barnaby Jones. There was one called Longstreet. And they were all these detective shows. And so we decided that Frank would be into a show like that where Frank's real life is stressful, but he loves a show starring a guy who gets it, who really has it made, who like wins all the time. And so then we started talking about it, and we started hitting on this idea that he'd be played by some old over-the-hill guy. I'd say Colt Luger is more or less kind of based off of Robert Mitchum, who had been a big-time movie star in the 1940s and 50s. And then by come 1970 or so, he's a little old, he's a little paunchy, and he's now reduced to doing TV. So we had a whole backstory for this guy. But there was also a show with Robert Blake called Beretta. So we thought it was funny that he'd be named after two guns. So I pitched the name Colt Luger, and then we came up with his catchphrase, sometimes a man's got to do what a man does. And we just thought it would be funny that Frank, whose life is not perfect, really identifies with this guy who represents everything that he wishes he could be, the guy who gets the girl and the guy who punches the crap out of, young punks and everything like that. So that's where Colt Luger comes from.
Now, what else I love about the show was that I'm not going to ruin it for people who haven't seen it yet. I'm not that guy. But it doesn't have like a happy ending, which I kind of liked because then you feel like you can relate to it because it's a very outgoing show. It has some humor that people might not like. I love the show. I like that humor. But what I'm saying is it kind of made it seem like a real show that we can relate to. So was that what you guys were going for with the not so happy ending?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think our feeling, our theme was that, like, life is hard and Frank is just sort of getting through his life and, he didn't want to get married originally, but now he's got this family. He loves them, but at the same time, they're a pain in his neck. And he's stuck in this world where the world he grew up in is changing around him. So it couldn't have a happy ending. And when, as well, because we're moving into this, using what's Netflix's serialized storytelling, which requires, like a cliffhanger every episode, a thing that makes you want to watch the next episode. So originally, when we first thought of the show several years ago, we weren't thinking that way because we didn't know we were going to put it on Netflix. I'd say when we first thought of the show, Netflix as a place to make original shows didn't even exist. Netflix was just still doing movies and movies through the mail, and they had just started doing streaming. So we anticipated this show being on, a cable network or something where it would still be this kind of storytelling that we get on The Simpsons or on Family Guy, where every episode is more or less its own self-contained thing. But when Netflix suggested we do their style of storytelling, it was a bit of a difficult challenge at first, but then it became incredibly freeing because then it enabled us to sort of treat these people like they're real and that the things that happen to them are real things and that, if if a terrible thing happens to you, it carries over to the next episode. It doesn't just reset itself like it does on other shows. So it became important for us to sort of follow that through and to sort of think of these people as real people, that these events are real events. And then, of course, we wanted to end the season on a cliffhanger that would hopefully make people want to wait, and hopefully if we do a second season, want to find out what happened. So we couldn't just have a nice, neat resolution. We had to end with a cliffhanger, and we decided that would be the way to end the season. That Frank, I won't give it away if people haven't seen it yet, but that you think is resolved, but then there's an extra thing that makes it unresolved, and like you're saying, a not super happy ending.
Now, speaking of a second season, have you guys heard any rumblings or any rumors around the Netflix office about a second season? Because it would be perfect for your show.
Well, we absolutely want to do it. We haven't heard anything officially from them yet, but we've gotten positive feedback. They think that the show is good, and they've all been huge champions of the show. So, they do their business the way they do their thing, and I feel pretty confident. And hopeful and optimistic that we'll get to do more, and we hope to hear something from them sooner than later.
Now, how is everything going with The Simpsons? Because you guys are going on so many years of being on TV. How awesome is it to work on a legendary show like that, too?
Oh, my God. Well, I mean, I feel like the luckiest guy in the world when I got the job many years ago. I've been working there since 2002. So I worked on a bunch of shows. I had some good credits, but shows that didn't last more than a season or more than a half a season, and to be hired onto the legendary show that the greatest animated show of all time, one of the greatest comedies of all time, from a purely practical standpoint, meant that I was going to have some stability in my life, that I was going to be working for a while on a show that wasn't going to get canceled anytime soon. That was really nice for me and my family. But just from a creative point of view, to be on a show with the greatest writer's room and the greatest characters and the greatest cast of all time was just a thrill, and it remains a thrill. We have just the greatest actors, and Homer Simpson is one of the great characters of all time, and this huge cast of characters that we can write for. It's just, I'm so happy. It was such a happy experience working there. And it's fun to keep trying to come up with stories there, even though we're in our 28th season and we're up to around 600 episodes or so. But it's a huge challenge, and we take it very seriously, and we love the show and want to keep it going and make it as funny as we can.
What is Matt Groening like? Because he is one of my heroes. The Simpsons and Futurama are two of my all-time favorite shows of all time, and he is an underrated genius. What is he like?
Oh, well, yeah. I don't know if he's underrated, but
yeah,
he's a great guy. I mean, he was just there in the writers' room with us just about an hour or two ago. He's very much a regular person, I'd say. For someone who's had all the success and has rightfully earned a huge amount of money from the show, he's still just a regular person, I'd say. He's very affable. He's very fun. He doesn't work with us all the time. He's not in the room every single day. He's always there in some capacity, working on one thing or another. He comes to the table reads. He gives us notes. He's there when we're doing the edit sessions. He's involved, but he doesn't run the show. He's not there every single day in the writer's room. But his presence is always there, and we're always happy to see him, and he's always got something cool, something fun to pitch for the show. And he's just, I can't say enough great things about him.
Now, I was looking at your Wikipedia page. I was 3 years old when the show came out, but you worked for Homeboys in Outer Space, and I love that show because it's on YouTube, and it cracks me up. What was your time like there?
Oh, well, I mean, that was my very first primetime network job. I'd broken into the business a couple of years before, and I'd done some things that were really fun but hadn't really lasted. I'd done some animation, some Nickelodeon stuff. So to get on a primetime show was a huge dream. It was my first job, my first staff writing job. It's a show that at the time when it came out, and since then has taken on a kind of a thing where it's a joke, like a punchline, like this was a terrible show, and it's still Entertainment Weekly and other magazines will still use it as a punchline to refer to terrible shows. But for my experience, it was super fun. We had a great group of writers. I was so happy to be working on a primetime show, and I don't think I'd be on The Simpsons if I hadn't been on that show, because Al Jean and Mike Reese from The Simpsons had taken some time away from The Simpsons to work on developing their own material. And they were working at Disney Studios, which produced Homeboys in Outer Space at the time. And they worked as consulting producers on that show. And I got to meet them there. And they then hired me the next year for ABC called Teen Angel. And I got to know them and work with them a couple of times after that. And then, cut to 4 years later or so, 4 or 5 years later, and they're back at The Simpsons. And Al Jean is now back running The Simpsons, and he knows me enough to, when a job comes open, he calls me and offers me the job on The Simpsons. So I'll never say anything bad about Homeboys in Outer Space, because without that I wouldn't have The Simpsons. And I made a lot of great friends on that show who I'm still close with now.
Was it ever annoying when you would be on these shows and maybe you kind of get the vibe that the ratings aren't good and then it gets canceled, and then you work on another show and it gets canceled? Do you ever get discouraged, or do you keep saying to yourself, this is what I want, I'm going to make it happen?
Yeah, I mean, well, you always want the show to succeed, and from a purely financial, practical standpoint, if the show gets canceled, then you're out of work for a while, and you're always hoping, especially at the beginning of your career, that this won't be the last one, that you'll get hired again, So, but every time you start a new show and you've got a new group of people, a new writer's room, you're incredibly excited. It's really fun. And it's always discouraging if something doesn't work or something gets canceled, always. So that's why, I mean, it's sort of like the TV writer's life is kind of a vagabond experience where you're going from one thing to another with the hope of, everyone hopes for that kind of show that hits. Like if someone was someone who started on Modern Family, now it's in its 6th or 7th year, that's the kind of holy grail type show that doesn't come along that often. So you're always hoping for that, and you're always hoping to get that next thing. So for me to get on a show like The Simpsons, where I knew I'd be at least working for a couple of years, I didn't think anyone thought, 15 years ago that we'd still be on now. But to have a show like that means stability and a show that people know and people like was just a huge blessing.
Now, before I let you go, where can people find your work online, and where can they watch F is for Family?
Okay. Well, F is for Family is available on Netflix. So if you go on Netflix, just look for F is for Family. It's all 6 episodes are streaming right now. You could watch the entire season in about 2.5 hours. So as shorter than the newest Quentin Tarantino movie.
Yeah.
So it's on Netflix exclusively. That's where it is. If you're looking for my work online, I'm on Twitter. My Twitter handle it's kind of lame because I just created it the first day I joined Twitter. I wish I knew more about Twitter when I created my handle, but whatever. It's all one word. It's Mike Price in LA. So it's at Mike Price in LA. I tweet a lot about F is for Family, so if you want to know more about it, just look at my Twitter stream and you'll see everything. And I retweet a lot, and I like to engage with the fans. And you'll see some about my other work, my Simpsons work. In fact, I have an episode of The Simpsons that I wrote that's going to be on this Sunday.
Cool, nice.
It's about Apu and his nephew, and
awesome.
I think it's a good episode, and like that. So that's where you can see my other stuff.
Well, dude, I'll be sure to watch the episode this weekend, and also keep up the good work. And here's to hoping that F is for Family gets a second season, because this is some of the best comedy I have seen in years.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you. Great. Thank you, Ryan.
All right. Thank you, man. Have a good night.
You too.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.
And that was Michael Price, who is the co-creator of F is for Family, which is made with Bill Burr. And I'm a man of my words. I'm very critical of TV shows, but trust me when I say it's the best adult cartoon I have seen in years. If you are a fan of F is for Family and Michael Price and Bill Burr, and you want to hear more of Hoppe Hour, it's not hard. It's not rocket science. All you have to do is go to RyanHoppeRadio.com. That's RyanHoppe Radio.com. Tweet at me at Ryan Hoppe Radio and download my app into Google Play and iPhone shop by searching up Hoppe Radio. Speaking of that, this has been Hoppe Hour. I am your host, Ryan Hoppe, saying peace out.
Hoppe Hour. Hoppe Hour.